It's not just about the leader, it's about the ideology. Because really, when people are at a party with Jay-Z, Rihanna, and Diddy, at a visceral level, at a survival level, what people were excited about is they were in the music industry. They were in the top of the music industry. They were invited to that kind of event. Whenever you get to go to, and I'm sure you've been, if you haven't been, we can get you to one. I'm sure you've been to some sort of major political event.
No, I haven't.
We've got to get you to one. So I'm not saying like Democrat, Republican political. I mean like National Day for Mexico in Washington, D.C., right? Or 4th of July at the White House in Washington, D.C. When you're in an environment like that, the institution is the ideology that creates the energy, just like you were talking about in a cult. Very, very similar. It's the ideology that makes people believe in it. The cult leader is just the figurehead, right? There's a strong correlation between cult behavior and extremist behavior, right? Between terrorists and cults. Unfortunately, that same kind of infectious behavior is the same thing that exists at a church tent revival. It's the same kind of energy that exists at the Republican National Convention or the Democratic National Convention. It's that mass psychosis of such incredible faith and dedication to the ideology that ramps up the energy big time. And then when you have big figureheads, Jay-Z, Rihanna, Diddy, in a setting like that, the energy's off the wall. Nobody wants to be the one that kills the party, right? Not excusable, not justifiable, not legal. But you can kind of start to understand what led to all the bad decisions, what led to all the lies. I'm not saying you would do the same thing or I would do the same thing. What would happen is just like with a cult. Remember we talked about how cults are so powerful because they let everybody in and then they very quickly are okay with people leaving who don't belong. Right? You've heard of a term called the inner sanctum?
Yeah.
Inner sanctum is a very real thing. In a cult, there is an inner sanctum, the circle of influence that is closest to the leader. That inner sanctum, you don't get to that inner sanctum until you've earned the trust of the larger cult. So people are kicked out by the first layer of cult before they can ever reach the inner sanctum, which is where their real secrets lie. In this case, same thing with Diddy. There was an inner sanctum. That inner sanctum wasn't one man. That was attorneys, producers, promoters. That was a whole bunch of people involved. And that's one of the reasons why everybody's okay with him fighting, because if he falls, there's a whole slew of people falling after him before we even get to the fucking customers of the sex trafficking. And guess who's going to be on that list? More entertainers, more professional athletes, more businessmen, more millionaires. It's going to be a mess.
Well, I never even considered that. Holy smokes. Can't believe I didn't even think about it, but you're right.
Yeah, if you're getting a prostitute from Diddy, you're not like Joe You're not Joe Blow from Michigan. Yep.
No. Holy, oh my God. Okay, I've got one more case that I'd love to go over, and I'm always trying to be very honest that it's not just men. So I don't know if you've heard of Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Yes.
So a quick description in case people don't know who she is. So Gypsy Rose was actually born healthy, and at 3 months old, her mum, Diddy, suspected Gypsy was sick. But despite multiple examinations, doctors found no issues with her health. But over time, Diddy is convinced that Gypsy suffered from a chromosomal defect, leukemia, and muscular dystrophy, then claiming that Hurricane Katrina destroyed all of her medical records and birth certificates. Habitat of Humanity built them a small house. They put a wheelchair access home, and her story was so heartfelt around the world that it got media attention, and she was started to receive gifts, cash donations, concert tickets, celebrity meet and greets, and got a free trip to Disney World courtesy of Make-A-Wish Foundation. Now, it turns out that years later, Gypsy says that none of that was true and that she wasn't sick at all. It turns out her mum is suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And Gypsy says that she physically chained her to the bed and put bells around the doors so that she can see if Gypsy was going to move, because then her secret was going to be spoiled. So she couldn't escape. Now, it turns out Gypsy ended up meeting a guy and they killed the mother, stabbing her 17 times.
That's an incredible story, right?
So Munchausen by proxy is where a parent is convinced, falsely, that their child is sick. So the fact that she not only lied to the doctors, somehow convinced people she was in hospital, she was having operations. I mean, there were photos of tubes coming out of her daughter's, stomach. And all along, Gypsy says, I could walk, but my mum threatened me. My mum wouldn't let me walk. So how does somebody pull such a big, audacious lie over so many people for so long, for something so serious, and convinces doctors to operate on her child?
She believed it. She believed her own lie. And that's what's so dangerous about lies, is that we believe our own lies. Munchausen by proxy is an extreme example. Gypsy Rose, Diddy, Blanchett, the extreme example of what happens. Decades of believing your own lie, believing it so much that you're willing to put your child through pain, through surgery. Like Diddy Blanchett must have literally looked at her daughter in the eye and said, I know what's best for you and you don't, and you will go under the knife and you will have tubes coming out of your nose and your mouth and whatever else. You are sick. Stop telling me you're not sick. You don't even know what's best for you. That's what it takes for a mother to chain her daughter to bells and to a bed in the house. Think about how unhealthy mentally that person must be. But what it really boils down to is a simple fact where we believe our own lies. The biggest flaw in a liar is that a liar believes they're good at lying. They believe it. It's a lie. They're not good at lying, right? Even if you're trained to lie, you're still better at telling the truth. It's easier, it takes less effort, it's easy to recall, it's much easier to carry out than to tell a lie. But they believe the lie, and that's what makes them vulnerable. It's what makes them weak, right? The people who carry out affairs. The vast majority of affairs happen scientifically, empirically, they happen because the partner who's having the affair believes that something is missing from the relationship. They believe the lie, and they believe that the thing that's missing can be found somewhere else. Affection, attention, validation, money, who knows what. They believe it can be found somewhere else rather than being found at home where originally it was, right? All that is them believing the lie. Most affairs that are repeated over and over again, right, is a spouse who knows their partner is having an affair and then believes that they'll change. Believing the lie, right? Lies are so easy to believe because lies are a marriage of the left brain and the right brain simultaneously. We logically believe that we can control the lie or understand the lie, and then we creatively find ways to rationalize why we believe that the lie will change or the lie is something that we can adapt, right? So with Gypsy Rose, you have an extreme example that makes for a very good case study on something that can be even at the micro level. You believe that your kid's a good kid even though they're a bully in school. You believe that the person you're dating is a good man even though he's inconsistent and maybe even hits you. Like, you tell yourselves a lie and you believe the lie. And sometimes starting with a small lie is what ends up with being stabbed 17 times.
Wow. So it seems like then it's easier to believe a lie from a liar who truly believes their own lies than it is from somebody who's pretend or just trying to lie to get themselves out of a situation.
This is why we use the word fabrication, right? CIA uses the word fabrication instead of lie because lie is a catch-all term. If somebody's telling you something that's false, that's a lie. If somebody's making something up that's false, that's a lie. If somebody's telling you something they believe is true because they're uninformed, but it's not true, that's still a lie, right? Lying is a catch-all term. CIA has different terms for every single one of those lies. Have you heard how Eskimos have 17 different words for the word snow?
No.
And the Greeks have what, 4 different words for love?
Oh, probably. That sounds about right.
It's because there you come.
I'm like counting in Greek, yeah.
So, but we only have one word, right? So lie in English is a catch-all term. So what CIA uses is more professional terms to describe it. So fabrication is when you create something that isn't true. Our 3 rules that I taught you about time, consistency, and effort, that's how you find fabrication. If somebody truly believes that what they're saying is true when it's not, those 3 rules will break down. Now you're dealing with somebody who has an actual psychosis issue. We talked about Diddy. We talked about Gypsy Rose. We've talked about other violent offenders. They almost all break down to having some sort of psychosis that makes them as dramatic of an example as they are. Antisocial personality disorder, APD, oftentimes the term that's applied to people with sociology or psychopathy. That's what we're dealing with, is people who actually have a chemical imbalance in their brain.
That's what I was going to ask. If it seems like Gypsy Rose, I mean, I don't know enough, but because I don't have the condition, it's so hard for me to understand how a woman, I mean, because I'm a woman, that really hits me, how a woman could do such heinous things to their child.
Think
like
about
that.
what must have been done to that woman.
Yeah, I know, you're right.
Diddy must have come from such a horrible background. Cult leaders, we love to villainize cult leaders. They oftentimes come from absolute villainy. That's where they were born and conditioned. Right? There's a fantastic cult example called the Children of God. Right? Children of God was a cult leader who forced sexual behavior among his team. Women had to seduce men. They abused children. It was sex everywhere. Right? Even though it was a religious cult. That leader grew up in a house with essentially two cult leaders, with two people who were kicked out of every formal religion, every church, and they basically developed their own religion, and he was raised in the middle of that. It's the only thing he ever knew, right? Most experts agree that Didi Blanchett, Gypsy Rose's mother, most likely came from a house where she also had Munchausen by proxy from her parents, or serial sexual abuse that made her convinced nothing that could come out of her body wouldn't be flawed.
Oh, that's interesting. That never dawned on me. Yeah, I mean, hearing the story, she starved her because she was saying that she couldn't eat because she had leukemia. So she literally was starving her daughter while she was stuffing her face with food. And Gypsy said, even though I could eat, even though I could walk, it didn't even dawn on me to try and walk in public.
And when Gypsy did stage her escape, how did she do it? She had an internet boyfriend kill her mother, not help her escape, not incapacitate her mother, not break in why her mom was,
Or just expose her. Be like, guys, I can walk, I can eat. It's all been a lie.
Gypsy's solution was murder. That is not how a normal brain thinks. But we don't blame Gypsy for that necessarily. The law will blame Gypsy for that. But we don't personally blame her because we're like, such horrendous things were done to her. Like, that's not justice. Horrendous things were done to her, and those conditioned her to believe that the only solution that was viable was murder. And to her mind, it's probably totally moral and acceptable. Clearly, she was able to convince a man she had essentially never met except online to come in and do that. And like, I have a stabbing that killed my father.
Oh, God.
So there's a history of stabbing in my family, and being part of the military and being part of CIA. One of the only types of intimate killing, that's what stabbing is called, is an intimate killing. One types of intimate killing they never encourage us to participate in is a stabbing, because it is so emotionally damaging to repeatedly penetrate somebody's body with a physical implement. That blood gets all over you, it gets all over them, it splatters, it sprays, you hear screaming and begging, it's not fast. Like, stabbing is a horrible way to kill, and it's a horrible way to be killed. So to think that Gypsy's solution to get out of this situation wasn't any of the other more reasonable things that we talked about, it was, I need you to come stab my mother to death. And somebody else said yes to that. That means Gypsy had to cultivate that person to get them to say yes to that.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear about your father. I had no idea.
It's not a well-known story, but it's a story that I share when it's relevant. It's very relevant to this because it is. Was
he in the service?
He was in the Air Force. It was a violent crime actually here in California, and in many ways, like, part of the reason why it doesn't upset me too much is because my dad made bad decisions leading up to that event. He was drunk. He chose a conflict with a person who was clearly high on some sort of illegal drug. 1981, and a conflict broke out, and it's hard to beat somebody who's a druggie with a knife. It's just hard to you're not going to win that kind of fight, and that's what ended up happening to my dad.
Wow, I'm so sorry. Is that part of why you do what you do?
It's a big part of what shaped who I was after I found out the story. My mother didn't share that story with me. Actually, my mother never shared that story with me. My grandmother shared the story with me when I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Oh my God.
Because I was raised by a stepdad. I knew that my father had died, but I never knew why. And for whatever reason, my grandmother told me when I was a little bit older. And it just, when you're that age, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, and you have all the time in the world and all the creative energy in the world to kind of work through things, I mean, I remember there was a long period of time where I was just trying to grasp who would do that? Why would they do that? What would it be like to have that happen to you? Why would my dad make those decisions, right? Why? I'm 10 years old and even I can be like, if someone's high on cocaine or crack or whatever else, you don't talk shit to them. And when they pull out a knife, you don't make fun of them, right? You run the other way, you do something, but oh, he was drunk too, and why would you get drunk? So it's a big part of why I don't drink heavily. It's a big part of why I don't do drugs. It's a big part of why I'm very committed to fatherhood, because my dad's bad decision cost him the chance to be a father. Oh. And I can't let that kind of thing happen to me or my kids.
I mean, going back to how much of what happens in your childhood then echoes you as an adult. So obviously it's not the same thing, but in you saying, I bet you Diddy he was either a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy or had something else done to her for to do this, that can either echo into something horrific like what Diddy ends up doing to her child, or it can actually be beautiful in that, in your experience, it probably did shape what you do and who you are today and why you show up so much for people in your life and people, you know, who are watching that don't even know you, in trying to give service to maybe so that that doesn't happen to somebody else.
CIA specifically trains us to target people who are legacy traumatizers. Oh. People who were traumatized and who are now in a cycle where they will traumatize others, because that person is highly vulnerable. So whether it's a dictator or whether it's a general or whether it's some sort of like a, you know, extremist leader, there's a cycle of trauma that will continue. That's the easiest organization to penetrate, the cycle of trauma. And lots of people understand what the cycle of trauma looks like because they watched it happen to them, they watched it happen to their parents. They might even be watching themselves still traumatize their kids and they don't know how to fix it. They're like, I hate it when I yell at my daughter. It's just like when my mom yelled at me and I never liked it, but I don't know what else to do. Cycles of trauma are just, they're very difficult to break. But the people who understand that it just takes one to break a legacy of trauma. And when you break a legacy of trauma, you start a completely new chain of events. So if I can break the legacy of trauma from my childhood and I can give my children a healthy, beautiful family to grow up in, guess what they will then have as their foundation when they become adults? And now all of a sudden, I may have 2, 3, 5, 12 generations of healthy, supported, like connected family, where I came from a broken family, that came from a broken family, that came from a broken family, right?